Hey everyone, it's Kelvin and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial for Procreate. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Alpine Forest brush kit. And we're going to do a very simple project that will hopefully work as a great starting point and kind of show off some of the nice features of these brushes along the way. So after you buy the brush kit on Etsy, you'll have an option to download a PDF. And if you're having trouble finding the download, you can always log into your account on Etsy using the full Etsy website. Go to your accounts page and then go to your previous purchases page. And there you'll see a big download button. So once you manage to download the PDF, this is basically a PDF that contains a link to download the product itself because it's too large to put on Etsy. And it also has the link to this video. So first, let's download the brush kit. So I'll just click on the download button. It's going to ask me if I want to open this link. We'll do open. It'll open up Safari. It's going to ask me again, do you want to download? And I'll click download. Then it will just download the brush kit. You can check on the download by going up to the download page up here. And 21 megabytes. On my Wi-Fi, it's going to take maybe 30 seconds, but likely wherever you live, it's probably going to download much faster. Now after it's fully downloaded, we need to send it to Procreate to open up. So I'm just going to click on the magnifying glass. It's going to bring me back to the PDF. It might not in your case. It's just because I had this open using my Files app. So I'm just going to go out of the PDF there. And here's where the brush is downloaded. You can see it's in my downloads folder on the iPad. So I'm just going to tap on this to send it to Procreate. Now once the brushes have been sent, you'll see them appear at the very top of the brush panel as the most recently added brushes. Now this is just a brush kit. It doesn't include any paper textures, and that's because I offer a variety of textures to choose from on the Etsy store. I highly recommend the St Petersburg paper texture and the Forester paper texture, and I'll put links to both of those in the description below. So to start painting, I'm going to open up a watercolor paper texture in Procreate, and I'm using the St Petersburg texture. And whenever you use any of these paper textures, you have to paint underneath them. So in the layers panel, you'll see a group with the texture, the St. Petersburg texture itself. Make sure everything you paint happens down here, and you can just make more layers, as many layers as you want. Just make sure that you're not accidentally painting above the watercolor texture, or it won't work very well. So I'll select a blank layer under here, and for the brush, I'm going to start out with this one here. It's called the Fuzzy Round Brush, and I'm going to grab a sort of medium, kind of yellowy green color, nothing too saturated. Then at a pretty large size, I'm just going to make some random kind of layered swipes like this. Then after that, I'm going to use the water blender to kind of mix all this up. So I'm going to go back to the brush panel, and here are the three water blenders. This is the regular one, and this is the same one that I include in all of my watercolor kits, and it's the one I use almost always in my tutorials. But these two are totally new and pretty unique, so I'm going to try out the water blender Misty one. And this one is very unusual. So I can just click around like this, and you'll see it will kind of reshuffle the pattern a little bit. It'll reshuffle the brush strokes. But if I click and drag it, it also has a kind of different effect as well. So this is kind of like a two-part brush. You can use it for painting like this, or you can just tap it on any areas that you want to soften up. So this is pretty evenly blended, and I want to drop in another kind of color, another kind of shade of green, and then I'll blend that one in as well. So I'm going to go back and grab the fuzzy round brush again. But this time, I'm going to select a darker green, maybe a little bit bluish, and I'll just kind of scribble this along the bottom. Then I'm going to grab that same water blender again, and then mix it up a little bit more. So this looks really good. Next, I want to make it a little bit more of a stronger fade. So it's starting out dark down here, and then fading to this kind of medium green. I actually want it to go even lighter than this. So I'm going to use the selection tool, set to freehand, and I'll make an oval shape up here. I'll feather it out, just like that. Then I'll go to the hue, saturation, and brightness for the layer. And then I can just lighten that selection. Usually when you lighten it, it's also going to become a little bit oversaturated. So I'll desaturate it a little bit as well. There we go. And next, to finish up this background wash, I want to add a little bit of yellow there at the top, as if kind of sunlight is cutting through. So I'm going to use the same trick I just used before. I'll use the freehand selection tool. I'll make a selection up here. I'll feather that one out. Hue, saturation, and brightness for the layer. But this time I won't mess with any of those. I'll just shift it over towards yellow like that. Next, I want to add some kind of distant mountain details. So I'm going to make a new layer for those. And they're going to be on a layer just above the background that we just made. And the brush I'm going to use is the Bumpy Ridgeline brush. And I'm going to set the color to kind of the same green we've been using, but maybe just a slightly darker version of that. Now at a pretty large size, I think the maximum size, I'll just kind of go diagonally across the screen. And now you can see we've got this kind of distant mountain ridge line. And the bottom edge of this brush is a little bit hard, so I recommend blending it with the water blender. So I'm going to grab the regular water blender down here at a pretty large size as well. And I'll just kind of bring up the bottom edge just to soften it out. There we go, that looks pretty good. I'm going to do another layer of this, but this time I'm going to use the tree line brush, the pine tree line. Same kind of thing with a really large size, I guess. And I'm going to go across almost level. There we go. And that just adds, it's a similar brush as the distant ridgeline, but it just adds this kind of bumpy, sharp pointed edge that looks like distant trees. And we have the same issue with the bottom edge here being a little bit hard. So I'm going to grab the water blender again. So hopefully you can start to see this scene kind of coming together. Next, I'm going to add the pine trees in the foreground. And this is almost the last step for the scene here. So I'm going to do those on a different layer above everything. So the foreground is up here. Here's the middle ground with those distant mountains. And then here's the background. So I'm going to make sure the trees are up here. And for the brush, I'm going to start with the fine abstract pine brush at the very top. And I think, again, I can use the same shade of green, just maybe slightly darker, and we'll see what that looks like. Now to use these brushes, you're probably going to be using them at a pretty large size. And you just start with a very light pressure and press harder and harder, and then it will taper out and give you that tree shape. Now in some cases, it's a little bit hard to see the tree, and that's just a contrast issue. So an easy fix for that is to just open up the layers panel and then set the layer with the trees on it to multiply. And that'll sort of ensure that the trees are always darker than the background, and so they'll always show up that way. So I'm just going to continue on and add a couple more trees in this tree line. There we go, that looks pretty good. I think I'll change the tree brush and add in maybe blotchy pine. And then maybe as a finishing touch, I recommend grabbing the northern white pine and just adding a couple of those kind of off in the distance. Maybe just 4 of those is enough. Now if you want to, you can also blur the bottom of the tree line, kind of just like what we were doing with these distant mountains. I'll do it on this layer as well. But I recommend using, I guess instead of the regular water blender, you can try the Misty water blender. And let's try that one here. And I'll just blur up the bottom of those trees. Then after that, I can just kind of tap it around. And there's kind of a trick that I recommend. So see, the trees here are really sharp, and depending on what kind of look you want to go for, that can be fine. But I recommend going over it again with this Misty water blender, kind of around 20%, and just very, very lightly just tapping it. And I don't know if you can see that clearly, but if I just tap it very, very lightly, it just slightly blurs it and scatters the edge a little bit. It makes it look like this was kind of done a little bit wet on wet. So I'll just go through and do that in a few areas, wherever I think it looks good. Next, I'm going to open up the layers panel, and you can see all the 3 layers here. So here's the trees in the foreground, here's the middle ground, then here's the background wash. I'm just going to pinch those all together so they're on one layer. It's just a little bit easier to manage it this way. And I'm going to cut it into a shape. So as long as that layer is selected and everything is sort of merged together, I can grab the selection tool, set it to rectangle, and I can just draw a rectangle around the area of this painting that I want to keep. So it looks like over here, I'm a little bit going beyond the edge. So I'll try it again. So I'll deselect it, then grab the same tool again and try again. So there we go. And I'm going to go to copy and paste. And it looks like just the center got darker, but if you open up the layers panel, you'll see what happened. Here's the original one where everything is merged together. When I made the selection and copied it, it just copied it onto a layer above. So if we turn off the original one, all that we're left with is the copy, which is the selection box that we created. So I'll deselect it. And the edge of this is a little bit clean and sharp because we used that selection tool. And that might be okay. But one trick, if you want to roughen the edge and make it look a little bit more natural, just grab the eraser brush and then set it to the Forester fine liner brush. And kind of at a small size, maybe around 20%, you can actually just draw along the edge. There we go. So if I zoom in there, you can see that a little bit better. It just makes it look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to go through and do this trick on all the edges. So this one could be totally done, but if you want to, there's a really easy way to add some birds kind of off in the distance. So I'm going to do that with the Forster Fine Liner brush, and the color, kind of a dark grayish green color. And then I'm going to set the brush size really small, maybe like 5 or 6%. And I'm just going to do a couple of these kind of light V shapes, just to kind of suggest a couple of birds off there in the distance. And there we go. This one is all done. And here's what it looks like when I print it out. So hopefully that's a pretty good overview of the Alpine Forest brush kit. Now if you have any questions about this that this video doesn't answer, you can always message me on Etsy. Me and my brother are really active with the customer support there, so if you have a question, just send us a message and we can probably get back to you immediately. And that pretty much wraps it up. But as always, thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.